Hi, this is the Book Geek, and today I'm going to be talking about The Great Gatsby and what I like particularly about its detail and how it mostly ended. So first I'm going to give like an overall brief sort of description of the book and what I liked about it altogether, and then later go into some spoilers and talk about some of the details I like particularly. So The Great Gatsby is told from the perspective of Nick Carraway, and he's just kind of like a regular businessman, and he is cousins with Daisy Buchanan, who's this woman who lives the rich life, and she's very admirable, and she's loved by both men and women who like just think she's so beautiful and perfect and angelic. And Nick Carraway moves and he becomes neighbors with Gatsby, and he slowly gets to know Gatsby, and more of like Gatsby's personality that not a lot of people know about unfolds. Then you learn of the relationship and the links between the characters and all of the different complications, and you kind of learn to love some, you learn to hate others, just as you would any other book. But what's particularly interesting about this book is it's really short, but the details are something kind of special because you have to really pay attention to it. It is a small book, but when you're reading, it's not necessarily given to you. A lot of what they talk about in the background is very implied, and that's what I love about the detailing. And so you read, and they use a lot of like similes and metaphors to kind of get you to understand it, and I think that's something unique about The Great Gatsby. And so as you read on, it kind of gets a little difficult to catch on with what they're trying to say and all the detailing, but you in the end you kind of get the big picture, which is all you need. And not only that, but some of the detailing is spot on and it's really beautiful, and it's not overwhelming in so much that you have to push yourself through all of it and to read it all just to get it through and get to the good stuff in the book. It's something that you really pay attention to. And personally, when I was reading the book, I was actually underlining some of the details, which I'll talk about later, because I really loved some of them, and the way that they described Daisy and the scenery in Gatsby's house. It was really beautiful. Now I'm going to talk about some spoilers, and I'm going to read two lines from the book from the very beginning that I really liked, and one is just Nick Carraway describing the room of Daisy's house, and the next is going to be Daisy herself. Okay, so the first one is going to be Nick Carraway describing the room in Daisy's house. Breeze blew through the room, blew curtains at one end and out the other like pale flags, twisting them up toward the frosted wedding cake of the ceiling, and then rippled over the wine-colored rug, making a shadow on it as wind does on the sea. And when I read this, I underlined it particularly because it built so much imagery, and it doesn't really take a lot to relate to what they're trying to say. I mean, you read some books and they try to describe things by using similar events or pretty much just events, and here they just kind of use like a general aspect of it. So let's say you're reading another book and it could allude to some historical fiction, and you don't necessarily know the background needed to understand that particular part of the book. But here in The Great Gatsby, I mean, they use like frosting of a wedding cake and like the shadow over the sea. I mean, everyone's pretty much bound to know what that looks like, and to have used that to build the imagery and know more of like Nick Carraway's view of her house, and it kind of symbolizes how he views Daisy herself. Okay, the next one I'm going to read is how Nick describes Daisy. And I think almost in a nutshell, this is kind of how everyone sees her. And then later I'm going to talk about the comparison between how Nick sees her and how Gatsby sees her and why he's so special to her. So first I'll read you what Nick thinks about, what Nick sees Daisy as. It was the kind of voice that the ear flows up and down, as if speech is an arrangement of notes that will never be played again. So in a way, he's kind of trying to say, you know, her voice is something so beautiful, something so unique and particular, and that's what is so admirable about it, is that she's someone that is so angelic that there isn't really anyone else like her. And that kind of goes into why Gatsby loves her so much. You know, when he first met her, he thought she was unlike anyone else. And after all these years, you learn in the book that he did everything almost that he could to find her again. And that's how he traces himself to Nick, and he tries to get Nick to put an arrangement between him and Daisy to get to see if Daisy still loves him. You read about Daisy and her husband Tom, and both are kind of in their own little worlds and fantasies, and Tom is very aggressive and very particular about just overall situations. I don't know if that really describes it the best. I think that's the best I can do for now. And then you have Daisy, who's in her little fantasy land, and I mean, she's always kind of been a part of that rich life, but she has that sort of like almost kind of careless and go with the flow mindset. So then later we found out more about Gatsby's past and really like the true stuff that happened, and not necessarily all the rumors from like what everyone else is making up about him. And that's what kind of makes Gatsby so special, and especially his love for Daisy, is that they both have an understanding for each other, and that they're kind of stuck in that rich life, and how everyone expects them to act not necessarily act a certain way, but everyone thinks they have a right to kind of like judge them, and like they have all these assumptions about them, but they don't necessarily want to be set in their ways from like the money that they have. And I mean, the book describes it a lot better, you should go read it, but in the end, when Gatsby was shot, I mean, he pretty much sacrificed his own life for Daisy, because when Wilson's wife gets hit by the car, and then the details kind of come in, you kind of piece it together, you find out that it was actually Daisy who was driving the car that hit Wilson's wife, killed her immediately. And so Wilson is kind of in this trance where he's looking for revenge, and then he kind of just like goes on his own and tries to figure it out on his own. And then he runs into Tom, who obviously gives him the wrong impression and the wrong information that Gatsby was the one who killed his wife. And so Gatsby just takes it because he knows that it was Daisy and he wants to protect her. She means so much to him that the fact that Gatsby's reputation, his life is in danger, and he just doesn't care. He would rather protect Daisy and would rather give his own life and put himself in danger than have her in that situation. So when he's shot, I mean, it's just kind of sudden, and it's so heartbreaking, especially because when they have his funeral, the only people that attend are Nick and Gatsby's father. And then I think that's when you kind of make the most of Gatsby's life, is when he's dead, and you kind of learn that all those people that would be at his house every day for his parties weren't actually his friends, and they were just people there just for the sake of being in that rich life. And you learn that the only real people, I guess you could say, that really cared about Gatsby were Nick and his father. And his father just comes out of the shadows to attend his own son's funeral, and he talks to Nick about how he's so proud of him and about how he has made such a life for himself, apart from his old life with his parents. And not even Daisy shows up to the funeral, and Nick finally hears from Daisy a while later. And so, I mean, in the end, it was really sad the way it ended, with Gatsby's death and taking the fall for Daisy, and no one coming to his funeral. That really sucked, but just the overall book is just kind of special in its own way, and that's what I guess you could say is so special about it, that there's no real way to describe it. You kind of just have to read it for yourself, and I don't think anyone can really give details the way F. Scott Fitzgerald did. He kind of made them very general so that everyone can understand them, but then they were at the same time brief enough that you understood what he was trying to say, and if you didn't, you pick it up later in the way. I guess what I'm just trying to say is that the relationship isn't really something that you can describe, and the real uniqueness, I guess you could say, of the book, you kind of just have to read it for yourself and see what you really like about it. Some people don't like it because it's kind of hard to understand the details, but once you really sort of engage yourself into it, you really appreciate the relationship between Daisy and Gatsby, and especially the relationship that develops between Nick and Gatsby, and how much Gatsby opens himself up to Nick. So that was my review on The Great Gatsby. I definitely recommend it. It's something, like I said, you just kind of read yourself, so go check it out, and thanks for watching.
Like and subscribe, and tune in for the Beauty Crew's next video.